Dawn light spread over Shaanxi valleys, revealing villages carved into cliffs. Terraced hillsides held earthen homes, their doors dark against pale soil. Farmers crossed frozen paths, breath visible, carrying tools toward fields below. Smoke lifted from cooking fires, drifting slowly beneath low winter clouds. Children stepped from cave dwellings, feet dusty, faces partly lit by sun. Goats stirred along ledges, bells clinking softly against stone walls nearby. The loess cliffs appeared calm, layered earth rising like silent shelves. Underground rooms held families, timber beams pressed tightly into packed clay. Elders sat near entrances, watching light change across familiar courtyards outside. Market paths waited empty, baskets stacked, animals tethered beside posts silently. Far rivers moved unseen, locked by cold beneath thin skins' ice. Wind traced ridgelines, lifting dust motes through shafts of pale sunlight today. Within caves, grain jars rested, lids sealed against moisture inside. Roof beams creaked faintly, settling sounds familiar after long winters there. No warnings marked the morning, no tremors hinted at coming rupture. The ground held steady, fields crisp, horizons unbroken by motion yet. Suddenly, a deep rumble formed, rolling upward through buried stone layers. Cliffs shuddered first, a visible ripple racing along exposed faces there. Dust burst outward, clouds blooming from walls and ceilings everywhere suddenly. Ground waves buckled paths, stones hopping, footprints erased mid-step without warning. Cave entrances collapsed inward, sealing darkness where daylight stood moments earlier. Timber supports snapped, sharp cracks echoing as rooms folded flat below. Entire hillsides slumped, masses burying homes, animals alike beneath earth. The shaking intensified, vertical jolts tossing people against walls violently inside. Cracks split fields open, long fissures exposing darker soil beneath them. Water leapt from channels, splashing as banks fractured without mercy nearby. Air filled with grit, breathing difficult, eyes stinging across villages everywhere. Paths vanished instantly, replaced by jumbled stones and fallen earth heaps. Some caves pancaked completely, leaving flat scars on cliff faces above. Others partially held, ceilings sagging dangerously over trapped occupants inside still. Screams cut through the dust, then vanished under roaring ground noise around. Animals bolted blindly, hooves striking rock as slopes continued moving downward. Trees swayed violently, roots tearing loose as soil liquefied briefly there. Dust darkened daylight, turning morning into a choking twilight haze sudden. Village layouts disappeared, landmarks erased beneath continuous sliding debris from above. The shaking persisted, seconds stretching endlessly as structures failed repeatedly nearby. In narrow ravines, rockfalls thundered, blocking passages with fresh rubble quickly. Families separated instantly, individuals thrown apart by collapsing spaces within caves. The earth groaned loudly, a sustained sound felt through bodies and bones. Surface waves rippled outward, knocking people prone across open ground nearby. Walls split vertically, sunlight slicing interiors before roofs collapsed down completely. Dust plumes rose kilometers, marking destruction lines across the basin below. Roads cracked apart, segments offset, making travel impossible immediately for all. Bridges failed suddenly, spans dropping into rivers amid splashing mud below. The main shock continued, relentless motion allowing no safe refuge anywhere. Collapsed caves emitted muffled sounds, trapped voices swallowed by earth inside. Dust coated everything, skin, hair, clothing, indistinguishable beneath gray layers thick. Aftershocks followed closely, smaller jolts toppling weakened remnants across the region.
Survivors staggered outward, disoriented, bleeding, searching through settling dust for family. Many found voids, entrances gone, familiar paths erased entirely by collapse. The ground slowly calmed, motion easing, though silence felt unstable afterward. Dust settled gradually, revealing flattened slopes where villages once stood there. Cave networks lay crushed, their chambers compacted into lifeless layers below. Open fields showed scars, long ruptures tracing invisible fault paths nearby. Surviving structures leaned awkwardly, beams exposed like broken ribs everywhere around. Water sources turned muddy, springs altered, channels newly redirected by force. Fires sputtered out, smothered by dust and collapsed kitchens around homes. Livestock lay injured, penned by debris, movement slow and fearful nearby. People gathered silently, counting survivors amid broken landscapes under the haze. The scale emerged slowly, destruction stretching beyond immediate sightlines everywhere. News could not travel, roads severed, messengers blocked by terrain around. Entire districts lay isolated, help unreachable across shattered geography after disaster. Cold winter air returned, exposing survivors to night without shelter nearby. Darkness fell early, fires absent, the land eerily unlit after collapse. Moans carried faintly, then vanished as exhaustion overtook bodies beneath rubble. The night revealed outlines, collapsed slopes silhouetted against stars above them. Aftershocks trembled again, brief reminders of instability underfoot through the ground. People avoided cliffs, fearing further collapses in darkness around their homes. Bodies lay unrecovered, positions fixed where walls had fallen without movement. The silence deepened, punctuated by settling debris and distant slides nearby. Morning would later reveal numbers, but night showed only absence there. Across Shaanxi, countless homes no longer existed by dawn after shaking. The land itself appeared altered, contours rearranged by immense force everywhere. This was the beginning, devastation still unfolding beyond immediate view there. Under the stars, survivors waited, unsure which slopes might fail next. The earthquake had passed, yet its consequences surrounded every breath there. Across the basin, the deadliest seismic event had begun that day. What followed would reshape lives, landscapes, and memory for generations afterward. In shattered villages, dawn approached slowly over smoke and dust clouds. Light revealed survivors moving carefully, testing ground before each step forward. Ruins stretched outward, a continuous field of collapse and silence around. The first day ended, leaving unanswered losses scattered across Shaanxi.
Morning exposed wider damage, valleys scarred continuously beyond earlier sightlines. Dust still hovered low, muting colors across farms, towns, hills everywhere. Collapsed cave mouths dotted cliffs, dark holes replacing once busy doorways everywhere. People moved cautiously, stepping around fissures splitting courtyards and paths nearby. Aftershocks rattled intermittently, sending loose stones tumbling from slopes above again. Rivers ran thick with silt, banks slumped where earth shifted overnight. Irrigation channels lay broken, water pooling uselessly across cracked fields below. Survivors dug bare-handed, scraping debris from collapsed chambers silently through hours. Occasional cries emerged, then stopped as earth shifted again beneath them. Makeshift tools appeared, wooden poles prying stones aside carefully by hand. Bodies surfaced slowly, dust-covered forms laid gently nearby on ground today. Cold air stiffened limbs, complicating rescue attempts through long daylight hours. Villages communicated by shouting, voices carrying across ravines and fields only. No officials arrived, routes impassable, distances suddenly enormous after widespread collapse.
Entire families vanished, entrances sealed beneath meters of compacted loess earth. Survivors marked locations with stones, hoping to remember positions later accurately. Food stores were buried, grain unreachable within crushed storage caves below. Water shortages grew quickly as springs altered or disappeared after rupture. Night shelters formed outdoors, blankets scarce, fires difficult to sustain there. People slept lightly, listening for movement from unstable cliffs above them. At dawn, smoke-free horizons revealed destruction extending far outward beyond valleys. Messenger runners attempted travel, navigating rubble-choked passes cautiously with great difficulty. Some collapsed slopes dammed streams, creating temporary muddy lakes upstream areas. Others drained valleys, leaving channels dry and exposed after ground shifted. Religious structures fared poorly. Brick towers crumbled into heaps beside roads. Courtyards, once communal, became burial grounds marked by stones and cloth. Animals wandered loose, owners missing, fences flattened everywhere across damaged villages. Weather shifted colder, frost forming overnight on exposed rubble without cover. Illness threatened, wounds untreated, sanitation impossible amid debris during early days. Counting the dead proved impossible, numbers beyond comprehension for any observer. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe to keep history visible. Entire counties reported devastation, though reports traveled slowly by foot only. Aftershocks continued weekly, undermining confidence in remaining shelters through following months. Temporary huts rose, simple frames covered with straw mats for survival. These structures clustered away from cliffs, favoring open ground for safety. Agriculture halted abruptly, planting seasons missed across regions during that year. Famine risk increased, granaries destroyed, transport networks severed by seismic damage. Local officials struggled, records buried, population suddenly uncounted after administrative collapse. Messages reached imperial centers describing unimaginable loss from the northwest provinces. Courts debated responses, resources strained by distance and scale of destruction. Aid mobilization moved slowly, hindered by winter terrain and damaged roads. Meanwhile, survivors adapted, sharing labor, rationing scarce supplies within temporary camps. Communal cooking resumed, simple meals prepared over small fires at night. Stories circulated, mapping losses through spoken names and places remembered aloud. Memory became record, replacing buried documents and registers lost during collapse. Grief expressed quietly, without ceremony, amid ongoing survival work each day. The landscape taught caution, every slope suspect after shaking events passed. Travel routes rerouted, avoiding cliffs prone to delayed slides and falls. Some areas remained abandoned, too dangerous for return despite former homes. Seismic scars persisted, visible lines crossing fields permanently after the quake. Reconstruction plans emerged slowly, constrained by resources and fear of aftershocks. Knowledge spread about loess weakness, altering future dwelling choices across regions. Cliff caves fell out of favor where alternatives existed after disaster. Yet poverty forced returns, risk accepted for shelter by many families. The earthquake reshaped settlement patterns across northern China for generations afterward. Its death toll dwarfed others, unprecedented within recorded history by numbers. Estimations climbed over time, reflecting missing and buried victims across regions. Numbers approached hundreds thousands, then surpassed earlier reckonings as counts expanded. The figure settled grimly, around 830,000 lives lost. Each number represented places erased from the living map that day. Fields remembered footpaths, now broken by invisible faults running beneath soil. Oral histories preserved images of collapsing hillsides and vanishing villages suddenly. Generations recounted survival lessons shaped by Earth's movement during that quake. Markers placed years later indicated former villages now buried beneath slopes. The terrain kept secrets, bodies unrecovered within compacted layers of earth. Seasonal rains occasionally exposed fragments, reminders of loss from the quake. Authorities discouraged disturbance, allowing ground to remain sealed over those sites. Maps adjusted gradually, redrawing borders of habitable land after seismic change. The earthquake entered chronicles as unmatched catastrophe within Chinese historical records. Scholars analyzed causes, noting fault ruptures beneath the loess plateau near Shaanxi. They documented building practices contributing to extreme mortality during the quake. Lessons informed later construction, favoring surface structures with flexible materials used. Memory of destruction lingered, shaping cultural caution toward the unstable earth. Despite time, the landscape still bore quake signatures visible to travelers. The deadliest earthquake remained a benchmark for disaster in human history. Its story unfolded through ruins, records, and remembrance passed down generations. This middle chapter showed survival amid persistent danger following the shocks. Recovery progressed unevenly, shaped by geography and resources available to communities. The earthquake's reach extended far beyond the first day of shaking. Consequences unfolded slowly across years of adaptation after the initial collapse. What remained visible was altered land and cautious people living there. Batch 2 ends with landscapes, systems, and lives transformed by quake. The narrative continued, grounded firmly in observable change across the region.
Years later, rebuilt villages stood lower, spread outward across safer open ground. Cliffs remained scarred, abandoned caves visible like wounds along loess faces everywhere. Stone markers identified buried settlements, names etched to remember absent communities there. Travelers noticed uneven horizons, slopes subtly shifted compared with older maps nearby. Farming resumed cautiously, furrows adjusted to cracks crossing former fields still visible. New houses used timber frames, lighter roofs, walls separated from cliff faces. Communities scheduled drills, watching ground behavior during minor tremors frequently together now. Historical records compiled testimonies detailing sequences of collapse across counties during disaster. Scholars sketched diagrams, faults traced beneath the plateau using observations gathered locally. Imperial archives preserved reports tallying losses despite incomplete censuses afterward from regions. Memorial days emerged, quiet gatherings held where villages once existed before collapse. Offerings placed on stones, incense smoke drifting across silent clearings during ceremonies. Children learned stories, pointing toward hillsides that swallowed ancestors whole without warning. Seasonal rains reshaped scars, yet underlying fractures remained unchanged beneath the surface. Occasional landslides occurred years later, triggered by storms saturating low soils nearby. Communities monitored slopes, clearing debris channels to reduce sudden failures after rainfall. Archaeological digs avoided known burial zones, respecting entombed victims beneath the ground. The plateau settled into stability, though memory kept vigilance alive within communities. Travel guides warned newcomers, describing earthquake history shaping regional precautions for safety. Architecture textbooks cited Shaanxi, illustrating hazards of loess cave dwellings during earthquakes. The disaster influenced policy, encouraging dispersed settlements over concentrated cliff housing designs. Survivor lineages traced resilience, rebuilding livelihoods through adaptation and cooperation after losses. Songs and poems referenced shaking earth,
metaphors grounded in lived experience thereafter. Regional memory compared disasters, none approaching the scale of 1556 earthquake events. Foreign travelers later remarked, hearing legends of vanished cities beneath hills nearby. Maps marked hazard zones, shading areas prone to collapse carefully after studies. Educational teachings emphasized preparedness, using past devastation as instruction for generations. Cultural attitudes toward land shifted, respecting instability beneath apparent calmness after experience. Over centuries, rebuilding continued, yet population densities remained moderated across plateau areas. Scientific instruments eventually measured faults, confirming historical accounts' accuracy from archives there. Museums displayed artifacts, household items recovered from collapsed cave sites during excavations. Exhibits showed cross-sections, explaining how loess failed under shaking forces then. Visitors observed diagrams, tracing wave paths through layered earth beneath Shaanxi region. Commemorative texts avoided exaggeration, presenting evidence through measured language for credibility purposes. The quake remained a reference point for seismic risk worldwide in studies. International comparisons listed fatalities, placing Shaanxi highest among earthquakes ever recorded globally. Despite time, the event resisted abstraction, grounded in physical remnants across landscapes. Collapsed layers still compressed bones, tools, walls within hardened earth below surface. Occasional construction unearthed fragments, halting work for respectful reburial of remains there. The ground held memory materially, not just through written chronicles, but matter. Seismic science advanced, yet humility remained before Earth's capacity for destruction there. In classrooms, teachers referenced maps showing rupture zones and damage patterns clearly. Field surveys continued, documenting slow erosion of quake-altered terrain over decades afterward. Local elders corrected details, preserving accuracy through oral transmission within families there. Anniversaries passed quietly, marked by reflection rather than spectacle across communities today. The land recovered vegetation, grasses covering once raw collapse scars over time slowly. Yet subtle depressions remained, betraying buried voids beneath soil from collapsed caves. Travelers walked unknowingly, footsteps passing above sealed chambers below formed centuries earlier. The earthquake's legacy persisted spatially, etched into geography itself across northern China. It also persisted temporally, influencing choices long after witnesses died from event. Risk awareness replaced complacency, reshaping human-Earth relationships permanently across plateau regions there. Modern seismology honors such events, learning through documented devastation from history carefully. The 1556 disaster stands singular, defined by scale and context within records. It combined vulnerable housing, dense populations, and unforgiving geology beneath settlements there. Together, these factors produced unparalleled mortality during one devastating day in history. The day ended, but consequences unfolded across centuries afterward for Shaanxi people. Geography, memory, and policy intertwined, shaped by that earthquake across regional development. Standing today, one sees calm landscapes masking turbulent pasts beneath quiet surfaces. The deadliest earthquake ever remained present through altered landforms visible to observers. Its story required observation, not embellishment, grounded in material change across time. Cameras would linger on soil layers, cracks, and rebuilt homes standing nearby. Wide shots captured plateaus, narrow shots revealed human scale within vast terrain. Silence framed scenes, allowing landscapes to communicate loss directly, without words spoken. Movement appeared sparingly, wind crossing grasses over settled scars left by earthquake. Human figures entered cautiously, emphasizing scale between people and land after disaster. Time compressed visually, centuries implied through weathered markers standing alone there still. The narrative concluded not with closure, but enduring presence within place itself. Earthquake aftermath remained visible, a constant reference for understanding natural hazards globally. Viewers left with landscapes, not numbers, etched in memory through imagery alone. The dead were implied through absence, spaces where life ended abruptly there. This approach mirrored reality, where voids spoke louder than counts ever could. The film rested finally on land, unchanged yet transformed by history beneath. From dawn to dusk, the story traced physical consequence of earthquake forces there. Nothing abstract remained, only surfaces shaped by immense motion over time there. The Shaanxi earthquake stood complete, defined through observation alone within the documentary frame. Its legacy endured quietly, embedded within soil, practice, memory across generations still. What vanished in one day remained present through altered earth for centuries. This final image held, land bearing witness without narration beyond what's shown.
Subscribe to this channel for stories where the past still shapes the present.